Let's plant some seeds and let's hope they grow into big and strong pepper plants. Let's see how to do that. Alright, we find ourselves back in IntelliJ once more, and in this tutorial we're going to add our own custom crop or plant block to the game, and this is once again sort of something that's a little bit tricky because there's like one or two steps which are a little bit weird in here, but no worries, I'm sure that we will manage. So firstly, we'll actually need to create a custom block class in our custom package up here. So right click new Java class, and this is going to be the pepper plant block class, which of course will extend the crop block this time, not the normal block. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Let's just create constructor matching super and making sure that this constructor is actually public. That's very important. Otherwise, of course, we cannot create a new pepper plant block, which is of course not quite what we want. And let's middle mouse button click on the crop block, and you can see that this has, you know, some interesting things. There's a lot of methods in here already, but we don't actually need to override many, actually only one of them. There's one very interesting thing, and that is this max age here and this age property. As you can see, this is probably the most important thing to keep in mind. The plant block that we're going to do is going to have the same number of basically ages or stages in its development and in its like growth that the normal weed block has. If you wanted to change that, then you would need to change this in property as well as, for example, this get max age here. So please keep that in mind if you want something that has more or a, you know, fewer age, and this is something you need to change. And then also, you know, later down the line, we will see certain change that you will need to do as well, but that's for a later time. The only method that we need to override in here is the get seeds item method, and we're going to keep this like this for the time being. But once we made our seeds item, this actually goes in here. But first we need to make the actual block, and this is going to be very interesting because here we actually need a new method, and that is basically the same as the register block method. So we're just going to copy this over, but this is going to be the register block without block item, and we will just get rid of this register block item method here because the actual plant block shouldn't have an item associated with it that you can place down. The block item, more or less, is actually the seeds, right? So this is why we need to do this. And what we can do is we can just copy over the dice block here for the sake of argument, and we're going to say pepper underscore plant, and then this is the pepper underscore plant, and then this is of course then a pepper plant block right here. Now what I will say is that what you should probably do is get rid of all of this, and then instead of using the material.of, we're going to use the material.copy, and what we're going to do is we're going to copy all of the things that the weed basically has in it, and then just to basically stay safe, we're also going to call non-opaque, and we're also going to call no collision, so that we neither collide with this block nor that basically that we have the transparency in there as well. And now that that is done, we can basically go to the mod items class and add our pepper seeds in there. So let's just copy the data tablet here, and this is of course going to be the pepper underscore seeds, and once again for the item here, pepper underscore seeds. And now what is interesting, this is not a new item, this is a new block item, and this will take in a block for the first parameter. So we're going to say ModBlocks dot pepper plant. There you go. So this is all that we need to do in this case. And now we also have the pepper seeds in here that we can now refer to in the custom crop class right here. So now here we can return mod items dot pepper seeds, as you can see, and now we will be able to plant that block with the actual pepper seeds. Now another thing that we need to do is we need to also add this block to the render layer here. So we're going to say ModBlocks pepper plant, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to take all of this and we'll basically move this to a different class. So in our util package, we're just going to create a new class called the mod render helper for the sake of argument. You could of course also rename this to something different, but that's going to be fine. And then we're just going to call this the set render layers method, and then instead of calling all of those in here, we're just going to cut them out with Control X and Control V to paste them in here, and then we will just call this. So this is going to be the mod render helper dot set render layers. So this just keeps the onInitialize method a little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer, and then we can always refer to this back if we basically want to change anything for the render layers. I definitely advise you to try to keep this as clean as possible. There's always ways that you can either improve it or even make it worse, but overall I like my main class more or less to be very clean and very like easy to follow, so that we have, you know, multiple different methods, the multiple different static methods that we just call, and then everything sort of works from those methods on. That's just a personal thing that I would like to do. Right, and now the interesting thing are going to be the block states and, you know, the model files, because if I copy over the block states JSON, that is of course available to you in the description below, either in the GitHub repository or in individual gists. You can see that this is how it looks like. Now, this should come as no surprise, because of course what we've seen in the crop block class right here is that we had this int property, which is of course goes from 0 to 7. So there's 8 different, well, stages. And this is exactly what this variance, you know, does in the block states. It basically points to different, well, 8 different stages in this block. So different block models here. And this is also what we need. So we will also copy over the stages 0 to 7 as the JSON files. I highly recommend downloading this, because otherwise this can be, you know, a little bit crazy. What's important for the block models is that the parent here is block crop and the texture here is also crop. So that's very important. Otherwise it points to a normal texture, which is of course also available for download. So no worries there. Let's also add both of the, actually not both of the, only one item. We only need the pepper seeds item, of course, because the actual, you know, pepper block doesn't have any. And then let's also add the block textures here. So once again, those are all of the 8 different stages basically. So this definitely doesn't look like much, but this is just because it's just like 1 pixel. So let's see, as you can see there, it grows, and then we will actually be able to see that in the game as well in just a moment. Let's also add the seeds texture here. This is the pepper seeds right here. And then last but not least, of course, let's not forget to add the translation as always. So this is actually does require both a block translation right here, so for the pepper plant, as well as the seeds. But this is of course fairly straightforward, all things considered. Overall, that is already it. Now the real like doozy here is definitely the 8 different, you know, JSON files here, and it can be fairly annoying, you know, renaming all of those and stuff like that. That is definitely understandable, but usually, of course, you know, if you only add like 1 or 2 different crops to the game, then it's not going to be too crazy. If you actually want to do like a farming mod, I would definitely recommend you to basically write a script that generates those automatically, because at that point, it's definitely going to be easier to do that. And one more thing I wanted to show is the actual loot table for this, because the loot table for this is actually going to be, well, fairly complicated, or more complex than the loot tables that we've seen previously. I am also going to copy this over, and then I'm also going to show you where I got this from. So this is the pepper plant JSON, of course, also available. As you can see, this is a little bit more complicated than we've previously seen, because this, of course, depends on the actual block state, you know, the block state property of this has to be 7, right? So we have to reach the mature age of this plant for it to actually drop some peppers. And this is what basically this condition does. So it basically checks, hey, does this even, you know, have reached the age of 7? And if that is the case, then we can drop the peppers. Otherwise, we will not drop the peppers. Otherwise, there's like a chance of dropping normal seeds. And then there's also a chance to drop extra seeds in basically this role right here. And I've of course got this from the external library. So you can always, of course, go down here and then go to net Minecraft 117 and so on and so forth to the assets folder, or in this case actually the data folder, Minecraft loot tables blocks. And this was just the wheat loot table. So if I open this one up, you can see I've just changed the names here. So what's very important is to change the Minecraft namespace here, and then of course the name of the items. If you were to, for example, choose a different max age, this has to be your new max age. So keep that in mind as well, and then it should basically work totally fine. Now that we've done everything, and now that everything is set up, let's see if it works. All right, we found ourselves in Minecraft, and as you can see, we actually have 2 pepper plants here. We're going to fix that in just a moment. The reason why that is of course, I have not called the new method that we've created, but that is a fix that is very easy to basically implement. So as you can see now, I can plant this. I could also plant the other one basically, right? This also would work. And then if I take some bone meal, I should be able to make this grow as well. So as you can see, there it is. And there are the peppers. And if I break this in the survival mode, I will get a pepper and some pepper plant seeds as well. So this is actually how easy it can be. And now let's actually, you know, get to the other one and change the mistake I've made there, the bug. That is of course right here, right? I just called the register block method. I, of course, here need to call the register block without a block item method. You know, something like this, some small mistakes like this, I usually keep in, because otherwise, you know, those tutorials seem like, hey, everything just works first time. That is definitely not the case. You should check out some of my live streams where I, you know, figure out some like basic problems for like 1.5 hours. The realism of the actual, you know, tutorials is definitely a little bit divorced from the actual, you know, realistic thing of how programming works. So usually I keep these like small things in. But another thing I recommend actually doing is making this an aliased block item. Reason being because this has a different name, right? So the pepper_seeds from the actual block. If those names are the same, then that's totally fine. But in this case, we actually want to make this an alias block item. Otherwise, it's going to take the name, so for the en_us JSON file, from the actual block. So that's also something that you can keep in mind here. Just a little tip as well. Alright, but that would already be it for this tutorial right here. I hope you found this useful and you learned something new. Once again, everything is of course available for you for download in the description below, either in the GitHub repository or in individual gists as well. And of course, I would very much appreciate a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more tutorials just like this one. So, yeah.